But we have with us two special guests, and that is Brian Chisholm. He's a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. Welcome. And Matt Morgan, also a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. And we have them here on this podcast because we are discussing defund the government. Why are we discussing defund the government? Because believe it or not, as Baltimore City continues to fall apart, the businesses in Fells Point have said, according to the Baltimore Sun, they are threatening to withhold taxes if Baltimore does not address crime, drug dealing, and other issues. So just from the Baltimore Sun, more than 30 businesses and restaurant owners in Fells Point are threatening to withhold taxes if city leaders do not address crime, trash, and other issues they say are plaguing the waterfront neighborhood. The group sent a letter to Baltimore officials Tuesday, 2 days after 3 people were shot in the popular and historic nightlife destinations. Just to let you know, podcast listeners, Fells Point in Baltimore City is this really cool, historic, kind of trendy area that everybody loves. And if you have people being shot in Fells Point and they're not picking up the trash in Fells Point, there aren't very many places left in Baltimore City where you can actually go and, kind of have fun. And that's really kind of a sad thing. I don't say that because I think it's a good thing. I think it's because it's really sad actually having been from there and born and raised there. So 2 days after 3 people were shot in the popular and historic nightlife destination early Sunday morning, complaining about blatant drug sales, public drinking, and other problems they say are happening in plain sight while police are handcuffed from enforcing the law. So this podcast is called Defunding Government because we finally have a solution to the whole defunding the police movement and the breakdown of the social order and the breakdown of basic services in America's legacy cities. And you know what that is? Taxpayers saying, if you're not providing the basic services, I'm not going to pay you any taxes. In fact, I'm going to withhold those taxes, not permanently, but I'm going to escrow them and put them in escrow until such time as you fix the problem, because fundamentally that's government's minimum job, right? Is to be able to provide basically public safety and trash pickup. So here's Fox 5 reporting on this issue in Fells Point.
People need to hold their children accountable. Parents need to know where their young people are. We have to have a better sense of community accountability as well.
If you're making sure that the families and the community hold yourselves accountable, but isn't that your job as an elected leader to make sure that this doesn't happen?
I think that what you guys have to understand, in your station in particular, this is also a cultural thing that we have to do. The police department, our city agencies absolutely have to hold people accountable. But what Baltimoreans say, and what you would see when you talk about people who have lived in Baltimore as long as I have and been here and understand the street and the street culture, is that we have to have a community sense of accountability.
Yeah, so we need a community sense of what to do. So look, this is a problem nationwide. We are picking on Baltimore because as Marylanders podcast listeners, we have 3 members of the House of Delegates present to be able to talk about this issue, because this is happening in Illinois. It's happening in Los Angeles. It's happening in San Francisco. It's happening in New York City. It's happening in Portland. I mean, it's happening all over the country. So what say you guys about this idea of defunding government?
I know you're not going to believe this, but I agree with Mayor Scott on one thing. It is a cultural shift in the culture that we've developed in Baltimore City and throughout some of the other cities you just mentioned, where it's the destruction of the family unit. 90% of every kid in Baltimore City is born out of wedlock. And if you don't have control of a family, then of course they're going to end up on the streets. And I hearken back to a year ago when State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby came out and said, we are not going to prosecute these low-level crimes, which include
trespassing,
prostitution, or what they call
drug dealing,
sex work, whatever that is. But so if you have the Baltimore Police Department knowing that they can arrest somebody that's not going to be prosecuted, then of course they're going to stand back. And now they feel like they've been handcuffed, so to speak, on controlling the crime. So now crime is out of control in Baltimore City. And I think it's smart on these businessmen and women to come out and say, you're not providing the services that we pay for every day, the services that we need in order to operate a functional business in your city that offers opportunity. So now we have it all collapsing upon itself. And would you go there? I wouldn't.
Here's what I love about this, Matt, is that instead of the businesses saying, you know what, we're just going to pick up and move, which of course you couldn't blame them if they did, and they moved out of the city and across the county line. And you could do that in any of these legacy cities across America. Instead, they're using something that's really different and very full of leverage, which is we have the money, you don't, you need our money to operate. You're not giving us what we want. We're going to hold on to it.
I love it. I love the issue. I love them fighting back. I mean, they're saying, yeah, we'll pay it. We're going to escrow the money until you get what you promised. Exactly. And that seems really, really smart. And hopefully it'll take over, maybe create a wave for the rest of the country. I've seen out in San Francisco where a bunch of Walgreens are just shutting down left and right there because they failed to prosecute any theft under $1,000. So people are just walking into these retail establishments and cleaning out the shelves. And there's nothing for the business owners to do.
Exactly.
And then they wonder why the businesses leave.
Yes. And then they say, well, cancel the police. And here's the thing. We've heard cancel the police all through 2020 during the peak pandemic. We still hear it today. In fact, in 2021, in April, MSNBC interviewed the Baltimore City's mayor, Brandon Scott. And Brandon Scott was so happy because the legislature in Maryland, you guys are legislators, the legislature in Maryland voted a whole series of bills, which together combine's purpose was to cancel the police and really, make sure that they couldn't do their jobs because the police were bad and the criminals were good. Here's Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott on MSNBC talking about in April how happy he was with what the legislature did to cancel the police and how he's going to reimagine it for his city. Here it is.
On this, I'm joined by Brandon Scott. He's the Democratic mayor of Baltimore, a man who some mayor call reckless and crazy for the things that you would actually like to do with Baltimore police. You obviously have been called that by the governor.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we are thankful and grateful to the great work of our state Senate and state delegation. We are grateful for the leader of Speaker Jones and Senate President Ferguson for taking the necessary steps to move us forward in Maryland. Maryland was the first state to have a law enforcement officer bill of rights, the first to repeal it. And listen, the governor is wrong, as he often is. We are talking about reimagining public safety.
Yes. That's the mayor of Baltimore. In April, when the legislature decided to pass bills to reimagine public safety, and he was talking to MSNBC, and now we have this incident and many more before it, and of course, many more to follow, I'm sure, in Fells Point, where one of the key communities in the city, a community that has to pay a lot of taxes, especially in that city, because it actually is a community that works within the city, they're saying we're not going to pay taxes. And you've got Brandon Scott saying, well, I'm so happy that the president of the Senate of Maryland, the state Senate of Maryland, also represents Fells Point. So he's been like getting on the news and talking about, of course, the president of the Senate, Bill Ferguson. He's talking about, oh yeah, we did the right thing. We really took care of these things, and we're just so wonderful that we managed to cancel the police. Now look what's happened in his own community, man.
Well, I think they're about to start to reimagine some new elected officials in Baltimore City after this. I mean, hope. Maybe you can reimagine an attorney general's office that actually prosecutes crime. I mean, Baltimore has had this problem for a while now. It's not something that's new coming along, but this is a city that's been under Democratic leadership for 60 years. And they cry systemic racism on things.
But they're in charge. They're in charge. I mean, they're they have a minority majority police force with a minority police chief, with a minority state's attorney. They have control of the city council.
The city council's 9 of 15 are minorities, yes. And the mayor is also black. And everybody belongs to the same political party.
Yes.
So when we get charged with, the systemic racism, and I don't even know how to react for that, represent a rural county in Maryland. And if you go back and look, like every dollar that we send to state government comes back to my county at 42 cents on a dollar, which in their area, they get more than $1.
Yeah, because they're redistributing from your area and sending it to Baltimore City, which is why you have a right to talk about this issue.
So you start thinking about it, it's like, wow, more of our tax money goes to people that we don't even know than to our own neighbors and to our own citizens. Of course, we should have the ability to weigh in, because a city like Baltimore City should really be the economic driver of the state. And right now it is a boat anchor.
It is.
I mean, 83% of the schools are failing. They reset murder records yearly. Right now, a statistic came out that Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras has a lower murder rate than Baltimore City.
unbelievable.
Well,
it is.
Reimagine an empty city, because that's what they're going to end up with. The census shows that people are just leaving in droves. And who's left? And this is honestly the sad part. The people that cannot leave, the people that can create real opportunity and wealth are the ones leaving in droves. It's the poor people that are stuck there. And it's funny that you mentioned Guatemala and some of the other southern countries down south, because I think that's mostly what's taken over Baltimore City now, because they're a magnet for illegal immigration and for people that can bring these crimes and can bring crimes without being identified. So all that's going to be left in Baltimore City, if you don't start to turn this around, is going to be the criminals and the poor people that cannot leave, because there's no point for somebody to endanger their life and end any chance of moving ahead if you know that the police are not there to help you.
Well, but defunding. So look, this idea of defunding, of course, government, that is to say people in this community in Fells Point, which is in Baltimore City, not sending in, let's say, their liquor taxes, or that would be to the state, but
personal property
taxes, not their property taxes themselves.
And they said they were going to escrow them.
They're going to escrow them. That's exactly right.
Well, I think this is a great idea for local businesses to do this. I mean, it's the only leverage that they have really over government. Their elected officials aren't listening to them. And let's face it. I mean, every election I've been a part of, there's always, people come out and say, we were going to talk about economic development. Look, county, local government, state governments, they got a pretty poor track record on economic development. But the one thing they're uniquely situated to do is provide security.
Yes.
And who the heck wants
public
to
safety? Yeah,
put a bunch of money into an area that might be challenging, and then only to have your business looted and robbed.
Yes,
that's not good economic development.
The good news is it'll only take less than $1,000, though.
Well, I'd really like to start reimagining schools for that area.
Well, exactly. and this is a great point. I mean, it's a great segue within the segment, which is to defund government. What if they just fully defunded government? I'm talking about the businesses and the residents, and said, we are not going to send in our tax money until you give us school choice. This might be, by the way, guys, an idea forward for the Republican Party to garner some support. The problem is you'd have to go into the city of Baltimore, which is incredibly unsafe right now, has been for a long time, and knock on doors and convince people this is the right thing to do. But nonetheless, it's a great idea. So here's MSNBC advocating for mental health professionals, to Mayor Brandon Scott. In other words, MSNBC is saying to Mayor Brandon Scott, and he's saying to MSNBC, well, when we reimagine police, maybe the idea is we send out a healthcare professional that is an expert on mental health. When you see the fights going on in Fells Point, and these fights are uniquely, by the way, podcast listeners, like it or not, they're uniquely black on black fights and black on black violence, and just random fights and just complete lawlessness. But MSNBC wants you to send out mental health professionals with the police, and that's going to solve the problem. That's how we're going to reimagine it. And here's the clip.
And you're talking about bringing in more health professionals, more social workers, more mental health professionals, things like that can get into that process alongside police if necessary, and do the things that police are not well trained to do.
Yeah, and it's really simple. We know that policing our way out of problems is not going to work. I was born in 1984. Baltimore was one of the most violent cities, and they poured more money into the police department. We're now in 2021, and we know we can do other things. It's not about eliminating them. It's about reducing the burden, stop over-relying on police departments so that we can impact.
Yeah, so we're going to just send out mental health professionals with the police officers. And while you see these two guys fighting, because we have video of that too, they're fighting in Fells Point, and then you have three people who are gunned down in Fells Point. We're going to just go up to them when they have their gun and say, guys, here's Dr. Rachel Levine. She's the Assistant Secretary of Health of the United States, and she's going to be with the police officers tonight. And Dr. Rachel Levine, of course, is a guy who's actually identifying as a woman. So we're going to send that person. How do you think that would work in Baltimore City? I'm just really curious. When you reimagine police, you send in Dr. Rachel Levine as a mental health professional in the squad car with a cop, and they walk up to a bunch of black guys, and say, hi, I'm Dr. Rachel Levine. I'm here to help
I
you.
think that program's called Hug a Thug.
Yeah.
There's a Hug a Thug program. Hug a Thug.
What is that?
What is the thug? I mean, that's the person that's beating up the other person.
I thought you were talking about Dr. Rachel Levine.
No, I'm talking about the healthcare professional that is going to drive around with the police instead of arresting them. Because they're criminals and
you give them a hug.
They're going to give them a hug,
and everything will be fine.
Yes,
she hugged them after they shoot somebody.
Right,
thug. Okay, and then Dr. Rachel Levine goes up and talks to them and offers them.
Look, my question for the mayor there is, the policies they're pushing, when they fail to produce the results they're promising, are they going to come back and admit that they're wrong? I've never seen an elected official admit, you know what, that just didn't work. So, I mean, if they want to try this, I really want to go full on with this. How do we put like cameras on these people, body cams, so we can watch the effects of liberal policies in action?
Well, Brian, here's an idea. Why don't we get the state Senate president of Maryland? His name is Bill Ferguson. He looks like he's 15, by the way. And he's very young, very, in my opinion, inexperienced. And always talks the talking points. Why don't we get the state Senate president, Bill Ferguson, who represents that area, to go around with Dr. Rachel Levine, because he's all in on this subject, and they can do the Hug a Thug program, and that'll solve the problem.
I think when we're talking about Dr. Rachel Levine talking about mental health, it's much akin to Hannibal Lecter giving you a talk on being a better vegan. It literally makes no sense at all. I mean, it lacks any common sense. And I would love to see any one of these people walk in the middle of Baltimore City when there's a fight going on. It's not going to be good for anybody unless we plan on taking The Rock and making him the mental health provider for everybody, because he's about the only one that can handle it in Baltimore City. Because I don't know if you've ever seen a fight in Baltimore City. It's often not one-on-one anymore. It's 1 against like 16 to 20 until you're completely demolished.
Exactly. And this is part of Reimagining Police. So we actually have a clip of Dr. Levine, who calls herself an ASH, which is the Assistant Secretary, Health Secretary, the Assistant, what is that? Assistant Secretary of Health. Yeah, ASH is what she calls, is it he?
That's what I thought it was.
She? So it's Dr. Rachel Levine, who was the former top health officer in the state of Pennsylvania, who now is at the federal level. And I think we should just send her with Brandon Scott, who's the mayor of Baltimore, and also the state Senate president, Bill Ferguson. Well, here is Dr. Rachel Levine in her own words talking about mental health. And this was really going to go well in Baltimore City when she goes around and talks to the thugs. We have that clip, and here it is.
Throughout my career, I have focused on the intersection between medical, mental, and behavioral health. And as your ASH, I will continue that focus and support policy initiatives to improve Americans' physical and mental well-being.
That's Dr. Rachel Levine.
We release her to go out and kick some ash.
That's
It's all your ash. Go get it.
But isn't it, to me, we have to make fun of this because Baltimore is in such a sad state that, and their solution is cancel the police, but hire Dr. Rachel Levine to talk to the thugs and the murderers.
Isn't the number one employer in the state of Maryland, not to mention Baltimore, Hopkins?
It's Johns Hopkins.
We have plenty of medical professionals up there. Yeah, I say we give it a try.
Yeah,
release them all. Let's go kick some ash.
You got the midnight shift.
The best medical school in the world. One of the best hospitals in the world is in Baltimore City, and they can't.
Good thing
they can't. Yeah, they need. There needs to be a lot of hospitalizations there from all the shootings. There's no doubt about that. So, should citizens defund the government? Yes or no?
Yes,
Baltimore
absolutely.
City?
They're the ones being asked to pay the bill, and if you're being asked to pay the bill, just like anything else in life, shouldn't you get the result you're looking for? And if you're not getting the result, then you stop paying the bill.
Perfect. Should citizens defund the government?
Absolutely. Absolutely.